Hello everyone and welcome. Today we're going to be talking a little bit about what to expect from Breath of the Wild 2. Of course, Breath of the Wild is an amazing game, but Zelda fans have always had one complaint. It simply lacked the usual variety of traditional dungeons, themed temples, and unique bosses. In today's video, we're going to talk about how Breath of the Wild's biggest complaints could have been fixed with a few simple changes and how this actually hints at what to expect for Breath of the Wild 2. And of course, we're going to back up what we're saying with interviews from Aonuma and others at Nintendo that help to hint at what to expect in this upcoming sequel. One thing to remember is that Aonuma and the Zelda team take fan criticism really well and actually go out of their way to implement these kind of changes. A few quick examples: the reason Breath of the Wild has such a huge focus on its open world and open air feel, as Nintendo says, being able to go anywhere you want and climb to the top of any distant mountain, etc., 100% free of borders, is because of complaints they received about Skyward Sword's linearity and lack of an open world. That's not the only dramatic change they've made though. Early interviews after Skyward Sword for the game that would eventually become Breath of the Wild have Aonuma and Miyamoto thrilled and excited to continue using Wii motion controls and implement it as much as they can in the next Zelda game, if not even more than Skyward Sword if possible. Almost every interview after that release of Skyward Sword had them talking about all the unique ideas and how excited they were to try and use motion controls in the next Zelda game. However, once again, after fans complained about Skyward Sword's motion controls, these ended up being completely taken out of the game.
If we go back even further, fans complained about Wind Waker's cartoony art style, and Nintendo completely cancelled Wind Waker 2, which they had already spent the better part of a year or longer working on, and changed their work to a third Hero of Time game, Ocarina of Time 3, Majora's Mask 2, whatever you would like to call it. And then they finally decided to change it once again, and we ended up with what we now know as Twilight Princess. We actually have a video linked in the description going more in depth on the history of this third Hero of Time game that is now lost to the world. Although I have only listed a few examples of how Nintendo has completely changed their path or the core fundamentals of their planned Zelda games, there are many, many more, which we often discuss on our Zelda podcast, the 𝐓𝐼𝐧𝐬𝐭𝐭𝐞𝐫, which you can find on Spotify and iTunes, and watch live here on YouTube every Sunday. We often have guests who have actually worked on the Zelda games. On our most recent episode, we had our friend Joe, who actually does the voice of Daruk and Yunobo from Breath of the Wild, as well as voice acting work in other video games and anime such as JoJo's Bizarre Adventures and Kingdom Hearts 3. In one of our upcoming episodes, we will also be having the voice of Zelda herself return once again to talk about her upcoming projects. So please go to iTunes or your podcast service and subscribe to the 𝐓𝐼𝐧𝐬𝐭𝐭𝐞𝐫 so you don't miss out when new information on Breath of the Wild 2 comes out. Going back to how well Nintendo listens to the complaints of their fans for the Zelda series, because they always want to make the perfect Zelda game. Sure, we have around 150 or more shrines, if you count the DLC. We had plenty of fire, ice, water, and many other shrines that were themed to make them unique, just as the Divine Beasts had their themes. But everything shared the same blue, stale aesthetic. And the worst part is, at the end of each Divine Beast, we would get the same thing, just a different flavor of a Blight Ganon. Sure, it's fun the first or maybe even the second time you complete a Divine Beast, but wasting every single major boss opportunity on the same person. You would think Nintendo would learn after so many complaints with Skyward Sword's 3 different boss fights wasted on Ghirahim, and 3 more boss fights wasted on the Imprisoned. So why waste every single boss fight in the next game with the same boss? They did so well with listening to the fan complaints from Skyward Sword and changing all of those major complaints to make such a wonderful game in Breath of the Wild. Yet they still kept this idea of fighting the same boss over and over. but at least Skyward Sword gave you a variety of different bosses. It wasn't just 𝐓𝐻𝐼 and the Imprisoned. We also had several other great bosses. So how do we make this unique and an overall better experience for fans in Breath of the Wild 2, or even the original Breath of the Wild? Give them something they have never had, and have it make sense to the main overall story, while not changing anything. It's actually very easy, and for the people who do love the battles with the different versions of Blight Ganon, we could actually still include them. In the story of Breath of the Wild, each race is going through their own tragedy and still recovering over their champion dying inside of the Divine Beasts. One sad thing about finishing the game and saving Hyrule is that while Zelda survives her 100-year imprisonment, the original champions who sacrificed their lives aren't brought back. Instead, they are just set free. Part of the narrative is for Link, the player, and the characters of the game to move on from their sadness and losing the champions, and move on to honor their memory. However, we have a way to bring them back like Zelda. The Divine Beasts have the spirits of the champions trapped inside them. But what if their bodies were also sealed inside? Once entering the boss room, we see the champion and think we can rescue them. Then we find out the calamity or malice from Ganon has corrupted the champion, and we have to fight an evil version of them. This may sound like a crazy idea, but it's actually happened before. This would be somewhat similar to Twilight Princess. The Goron Mines boss was Phyrus. He was the Goron Darbus, who was infected by a shard of fused shadow. The Snow Peak Ruins dungeon boss, Blizzetta, was Yetta corrupted by a shard of the Mirror of Twilight. We also have plenty of Zelda games where Princess Zelda is also corrupted, and we end up fighting her or having to save her. So even she could be a boss before fighting Ganon. We also have unique fights with Gerudo in Ocarina of Time, and even the brainwashed sage Nabooru, who we fight as an Iron Knuckle. So yes, fighting Urbosa would be amazing. Would you personally be a fan of fighting the champions of the Gerudo, Zora, Rito, and Gorons that are possessed by malice? Let's remember, this doesn't necessarily mean the boss would look exactly like the champion. The corrupted Goron looked a lot different, surrounded by flames, and almost twice his original size. And Blizzetta looked completely unrecognizable. So maybe the first phase of the battle is fighting the possessed champions as they normally look, with them using a more powerful or corrupted version of the power they eventually give you. Fighting against a much more powerful version of Urbosa's fury, maybe Daruk is able to charge at you with flaming spikes like Darbany from Majora's Mask. It could be like a more dangerous version of how a Lynel charges at you, and the path the Goron leaves behind them could be all flames, so it actually constricts where you can go in the battlefield. Or maybe you could use the fire to elevate yourself above them and attack from above. This could give many different battle options for fans who like to implement new tactics. Then, once the first phase of the battles are done, the evil malice leaves the body of the champions, allowing the spirits of the champions to once again find their home inside their own bodies. At this point, they could either fight alongside you, or stay too weakened to help, and you end up fighting the different blights of Ganon, now that they have left the bodies of the champions. After the fight, they bless you with their ability as usual, except now, they can return to their homes, and everyone gets a happier ending. How did their bodies stay alive for the 100 years? Well, perhaps being sealed, just like Zelda, or the different blights themselves. Or, just as the Blood Moon revives or heals enemies that are hurt, maybe since the bodies of the champions are possessed by the malice of Ganon, they are also healed during every Blood Moon. So this is how we would change what we feel is one of Breath of the Wild's biggest problems. We fought against Gorons, Zora, Gerudo, and other races many times before, so it would be exceptional to fight them as actual bosses and not have it just be a cool luxury, but fit in perfectly with the story that already exists, which in this case, it absolutely does. Comment below and let us know what you feel is Breath of the Wild's biggest mistake or problem, and how you would fix it, or how you hope they will fix it in Breath of the Wild 2.
Hey everyone, it's me again, 𝐅𝐼𝐬𝐢. I just wanted to say thank you so much for watching this video. And you know what? If you're a fan of videos like this, you should totally subscribe and give this video a like and comment below to let us know what type of videos you would like to see us create in the future. And if you would really like to support all of us here at the GameOverJesse channel, please consider purchasing a GameOverJesse t-shirt or becoming a Patreon at patreon.com/GameOverJesse, where you can receive many rewards, such as getting shoutouts, having any topic or theory that you select discussed on the podcast or made into its own video, having your question answered, joining on as a guest on the podcast, and playing with us during our Twitch live streams at twitch.tv/GameOverJesse, and much, much more.